Good morning to all of you who are joining us here today with the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce's webinar series. We have hosted to date several webinars on the logistics of this unprecedented economic disruption that we're all experiencing together. We felt like it was also very necessary for us to offer something geared towards emotional well-being. We know personally that these are unprecedented days, that they're challenging for all of us. And one part of making it through is just to check in and make sure we're doing what we can do for ourselves to stay emotionally healthy at this time. So today, to that end, we have with us Jamie Jitt from Compass Counseling. And I'm going to introduce Jamie, then I'll turn the webinar over to her. Jamie is, she's with Compass Counseling. She earned her bachelor's degree in education from Berea College and her master's degree in professional counseling from Grand Canyon University. She has experience with a variety of ages. She specializes in working with issues of grief, anxiety, depression, mood disorders, trauma, women's issues, adjustment to life changes, and relationship stressors. She completed extensive training in EMDR, which is a type of therapy proven effective for treating trauma. Other areas of her training include dialectical behavior therapy for teens and adults, and a variety of play therapy methods, including child-centered play therapy. She leads a variety of parenting workshops. And Jamie, thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Candace. I'm really excited to be here. One of the things that I love the most is working with parents, and I think I've got some things I hope will be helpful in sharing today. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here for our PowerPoint. So let me just give you a quick overview. So this is called Emotion Coaching for Your Kids, and it's actually all based on Dr. John Gottman's curriculum and research. So there's way more than we can cover in a short time today, and I'm happy if any of you would want to reach out for clarification or a few more tips. Please feel free to contact me at Compass, and I'll be happy to return your call and chat through if you have any specific concerns. So I'm just going to get started and let you know that we are going to skip over a couple of the slides here just for the sake of time. So first of all here, this is kind of more a backdrop now, a framework instead of a conversation starter. But I just want you to think for yourself in your own home growing up, how were emotions handled in your home? How did your parents handle emotions? How did your parents handle your emotions? What was their response to you as a child? If you can remember any of those times when maybe you were overwhelmed emotionally as a child, and how that was responded to in your household. And then secondly, thinking through for your own kids right now is a particularly necessary time for our kids to feel safe and have a safe space to explore the emotions that are coming up. We can shield them and try to bubble them from things, and a lot of us do a good job of that, but right now it's an even more challenging time to try to navigate that and help kids with that. So you can be sure that even if you've done a fantastic job in trying to shield them, they know things are up. If they're school age, even if they're in daycare, they're not in their normal environment anymore during the day. So that's just something for us to know, is that even if they're not showing it, they're having emotions over all the changes right now too. So just quickly, some of the benefits of emotion coaching. First of all, it's to create more connection with our kids. Secondly, research shows that there is so much benefit to kids with learning emotional intelligence and learning self-regulation. In fact, Dr. Gottman has presented a lot of research that has shown that even more important than your IQ, your emotional awareness and your ability to handle feelings is going to determine your success and happiness in all walks of life. So that is kind of the basis for this. And then finally, emotion coaching actually will lower a lot of risks for your kids. So antisocial behavior, even drug addiction, youth violence, and even suicide. There's lowered risk to all of these things when parents are using emotion coaching. So let's just really quickly, I want to give you the overview of Dr. Gottman's different styles of parenting. First of all, he has the dismissing parent style. So this is meaning dismissing emotions, not that you're dismissing care. Obviously you can still care for your children well, but not be very tolerant of their emotions. So with that, as well as the disapproving parent, again, this is in relation to emotions. If parents are disapproving of their kids' emotions, the effects in those two styles of parenting are that the children learn that their feelings are wrong or inappropriate, or that their feelings are not valid. The third type of parenting style he has is called the laissez-faire parent. The effect there is that kids don't learn to regulate their emotions, and they have trouble concentrating. They can have more difficulty forming friendships and getting along well with others. And then finally, what we're advocating here, of course, is to be the emotion coach parent. And the effect from that is that kids are learning to trust their feelings, to regulate their emotions, and to become better problem solvers. These kids have more of a high self-esteem, they learn well, and they get along with others well. Um, so let me just give you a quick overview of emotion dismissing parents. Often these parents won't notice lower intensity emotions in their kids, so they're maybe not going to pick up on the fact that their kids might be a little on edge. They're going to see negative emotions as toxic. They'll be very intolerant of negative emotional displays. They want their kids to be able to change emotions quickly. So again, if they're in a negative emotion state, then they want to see kids come out of that really quickly. Emotion dismissing parents believe that thinking about feelings is either harmful or just a waste of time, and they prefer cheerful children. They want their kids to always focus on the positive. And, some of this is well-meaning too. Parents don't necessarily mean to be an emotion dismissing parent. They truly want their kids to feel cheerful, and they want to help them be in a positive place. And they probably don't have any idea that by dismissing that emotion and trying to just sort of cheer them up is not as beneficial as they would want. Finally, they react with negativity, and they might punish a child for just being angry, even if there's not a misbehavior. So what we want to do now is get into the actual steps of emotion coaching. So the first one is to have an awareness of your child's emotions. Secondly, recognize the emotion as an opportunity for connection and teaching. Then really the next important phase here is to listen empathetically and to be able to validate their feelings. Next, labeling, helping kids verbalize their emotions and have a word for them, have the vocabulary for their emotions. Kids often from a young age know sad, mad, glad, but it's helpful for us to really give them more words, right? They have lower intensity and higher intensity emotions, so we need to help them learn the vocabulary for their emotions too. And then finally, this is not a presentation on discipline at all, but people do sometimes have questions about that. So the fifth step to emotion coaching is to set limits while helping the child problem solve. So this isn't a behavior modification presentation at all, but it is going to touch briefly on how you can validate emotions and also set limits for your kids. We're going to have to skip over this one for the clip, but actually I do want to go ahead and touch on the phrase here. So one of the things that's important is to communicate to your kids that their feelings and their wishes are acceptable, but not all behaviors are acceptable, because a lot of times our emotional responses that are coming from our kids also is accompanied by some behaviors that aren't acceptable. So we want to distinguish the difference between those two things. And one of the phrases we can use is, I can understand that. And then you're going to empathize first and then be able to share, okay, this is where we might need to set a limit on a specific behavior. So here are some of the strategies that come along with emotion coaching. First of all, you want to avoid criticism for your kids displaying their emotions, and avoid mocking. Secondly, you want to create a mental map of your child's world. So, this looks different right now than it is when your kids are in school or daycare. But you do know, if they're home with you and you're able to be working from home with them, you do know some of the things that might cause them some distress throughout the day. If they're working on school and they're still navigating this new online format for their school, I think that's important for you to kind of enter your day a little bit with that, knowing that they might have some frustration with Google Classroom or whatever format they're using. So just having in mind that kind of mental map of what's going on for your child, what kinds of emotions might come up for them today. Next, you don't want to just impose your solutions immediately. We want to remember that we're kind of coaching here, and that means that we're going to help them come up with some solutions on how to solve problems on their own too. You can guide them, you can coach them, but try not to jump in immediately with a fix or a solution for them. Next is just being honest. If you're new to emotion coaching, you might feel like, okay, you learn a few phrases, you might want to try to use those, but the thing is, you don't want to fake it. Just be honest. If you're having a tough day yourself, just tell your kids, I'm having a hard time thinking about all the things that are going to happen today. And, modeling that is a really good thing for your kids. Finally, if you're able to, reading books with your kids that build emotional language. I think our library still has online an extensive list of books that are designed for that, that have the focus on emotions and helping kids build that emotion language. So let's look at what some of the parenting mistakes can be when we're not emotion coaching. We might be using a critical phrase with our kids. You always overreact might be one that's used, or you never calm down like I need you to. So we want to try to avoid those kind of critical statements. Next, defensiveness. Sometimes our kids just call us out, don't they? Or there's a tendency for us as adults to get defensive at times. So we want to avoid that. And these last two will sound a little bit weird, so let me just give you some quick background. Dr. Gottman has done years and years of research with couples, not only just on the children research side of things, but with couples. He's a very renowned couples therapist. And these four, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, are actually predictors that lead to divorce when they are very common in a marriage. So just a quick background on that. So he wants us to avoid these things in our marriages and avoid these types of behaviors as parents. So it doesn't sound, like it makes a ton of sense to see contempt and stonewalling here on this page. But, sometimes we can use some sarcasm with our kids, or, that's something we just want to avoid. That's something that kids can pick up on and have a negative reaction in response to. And then stonewalling. So I think we've probably all done this, right? If your kid pushes you to some kind of a point where you're so frustrated, sometimes we just shut down. So we might, be totally closed off to our kid, even turn our back to them, or might have our arms crossed, or might just be avoiding our child. So we want to avoid that too. We need to take a deep breath, help ourselves in terms of our own emotional regulation, but don't turn away and stonewall your child. Finally, the most important thing here, because we're all going to make mistakes. So when you make a mistake, it's okay to admit it to your child and then just make a repair. That's a term that Gottman uses a lot. So when you acknowledge your mistake, you're teaching your kids how to mess up and still be forgiven. And making that effort to repair that interaction is going to really make that child feel important to you, and it actually helps strengthen that bond between you. So just make sure that when we make those parenting errors at times, that you take those extra few minutes to try to sort of have that repair time. Okay, so a couple of examples of what it would look like to validate your child's feelings. Here are just a few on the slide. I really like the one, you probably felt really sad, or you probably felt really scared, and that just helps them again with that building that emotional language. I really like the one that says, that would make me feel sad too, or I wish you didn't have to go through that. Those are just some good statements of validation. And then sometimes we need to remember we need to validate the positive too. So if they're telling you about something exciting, let's be validating about that too and say, oh, how exciting for you. Okay, so let's do a real quick example here of emotion coaching versus emotion dismissing. So any of us that have siblings, then we know that this one comes up a lot. So the child will say, "Mom, my sister just hit me." Mom might say, "Well, what did you do to deserve it?" So instead we want to avoid that. We want to just see the difference here, how that's an emotion dismissing moment. And then let's give an example here at the end. So let's say your child says, everyone at school is mean, I don't want to go. And dad or mom would say, oh, it sounds like you're frustrated, why don't you tell me more about that? So that's just another example. Here's a great statistic. The average preschooler makes 3 demands a minute on parents and caregivers. Their requests are their way of telling you what their wishes and their needs are. What we want to try to do is curb that natural reflex to say no, and to try to see what it is that your child is asking. And when we can say yes, let's try to say yes instead of to have those automatic no's. Already touched a minute here on not solving the problems too quick. You can ask your child, what do you think you should do? Or what would be a good solution to this problem? Being patient with their problem solving shows them that you're a team, you trust them. 95% of problem solving is understanding and empathy. It's not actually what is the answer here, how do we solve the problem? 95% of it is understanding and empathy. That right there will help us tremendously. Next, we want to make sure that we try not to label our kids. If you label your child as lazy or clumsy, they're going to start to believe you. Similarly, global positive labels can have those same kinds of consequences. If you're always telling them they're brilliant or they're a genius, they're going to perhaps hear an expectation here, which can make kids anxious or stressed, or make them afraid to be anything but brilliant. So I would encourage the growth mindset, which is that, we are all able to grow, and the harder we work and the more effort that we put into things, the better we'll be. So what you want to do is complement the effort that the child makes instead. Complimenting their actual effort there, not their natural genius. So there are a couple of barriers to effective emotion coaching. One of them is the parental agenda. Sometimes we're trying to maybe protect our kids from something, but that just something we just want to check ourselves on sometimes. What is maybe our own agenda there? Secondly, when parents get flooded themselves, when you're upset with your child, you really do need to take some time to calm down so that you can help regulate your own emotions and de-escalate that kind of situation. So the key to empathy here, if we were going to have a formula for it, the empathetic statement would be made up of 2 things. So you're going to name the feeling and then validate the feeling. So let's say that you're noticing that your child is really frustrated. So you're going to say, I can see that you look really frustrated with that right now. I would maybe be frustrated trying to learn this new thing too. And then also it's important to know that empathy does not necessarily mean agreement. You don't have to agree with every emotion that your child has, but you do want to empathize. And then lastly, empathy is not about discipline or praise. It doesn't reinforce or reward a child for having that feeling. It just helps the child feel less alone with their emotion. And kids can actually move on much more quickly from a negative emotion if that emotion is validated for them. I know what I've seen for my own kids is that they don't need me to solve the problem or need me to have a big conversation about it, but they do need to hear that they were heard, know that they were heard, and feel like their emotion is validated. And they can almost move right on past that so much more quickly. And you might be sitting there stressing, thinking, oh, they were really concerned about this thing, and 5 or 10 minutes later they really are over it, because you've helped empathize and you validated that for them. Just quickly, in the different stages of childhood, emotional development in early childhood, the goal there is to learn emotional regulation, and this happens through play, through pretend play. And the outcome in early childhood is that emotion coaching revolves around helping children learn to label, understand, and regulate emotions. Let's move into middle childhood. This changes, obviously. The goal is to then offer the ability to think logically and to begin to reason and problem solve. In this stage, the process here is discussion and sharing. So that's why emotion coaching is important for you to engage in that. And it's successful for kids when it's their own choice to talk. So parents just want to be really available. That's the key there. And then finally, social development actually drives intellectual development. And so that's a really key thing to know too. We want to make sure that we are helping our kids develop socially, because it will bring rewards and results for them in their intellectual development. Okay, and then finally in adolescence, things change a lot here, right? So the goal is to attempt to integrate emotions with reason. Here they're exploring their identities, and for those of you with teenagers, that this relationship at the time can kind of become like a roller coaster. But the outcome of using emotion coaching here is that parents are listening and can respect their child's opinion and try to be patient with their child's opinion. It doesn't mean they have to agree. Again, emotion coaching is not always agreeing, but trying to at least be a little bit more patient than you might be initially with an adolescent. Okay, these are just a couple of ideas for how you can help younger kids label emotions. So you could look through a magazine with them and make a collage, find some different photos of people displaying different emotions, and have them write out what they think those emotions are. I also like the feeling bank. Ask your child what they're feeling and write the word on a paper and just pop it into a jar. And at the end of the week, the child can look through that. It's just a way of helping to kind of normalize that we have a lot of different feelings in our week. For older kids or teens, maybe having them do a feelings log can be really helpful. I know in our work with teens in therapy, a lot of times we're just helping them try to learn more about emotions and helping them find healthy, positive ways to process emotions. And then, there are always going to be some kids who are a little more challenging with this. So for explosive kids, our goal is to try to understand what it is that's making the child become explosive and help them develop skills that are going to help them in flexibility to be able to tolerate frustration more and to be able to implement some problem solving. And then asking what questions instead of why questions is a good way to go with that. And then remembering that small successes are okay. So we've all probably had a child at some point who was in the coercive cycle. This is when your child is demanding something in an aversive manner. The parent will initially come down really hard on that and might threaten negative consequences, while the child just escalates. They don't shut down the behavior, they escalate, so it keeps amping up. The parent can get increasingly upset by this and threaten their child, or maybe even lose control with some anger or yelling, and then the child's escalation is just going to kind of continue there. And then what happens, the parent kind of gives up, right? They're exhausted and they're frustrated, and they're going to kind of give into that a lot of times. So what we want to try to know for that type of behavior, if you start to see that coercive cycle going on, just recognize it, help yourself, coach yourself a little bit through that too, saying to yourself, okay, this is, they're trying to bring a battle here with something they want. And then just make sure that you don't give in. You can use some of that emotion coaching to try to help shut that down. And then finally, if that misbehavior continues, you can try to implement whatever your other strategies are for discipline. But sometimes, emotion coaching really can help kind of move past that kind of coercive cycle. So just a summary, empathy is our highest priority. I think for the times that we're in right now, it's even more important that we have empathy for ourselves as parents, and that we have empathy with our children. Being an emotion coach, just remember, you want to focus more on connection than you do on discipline. Just try to connect with your kids right now in the midst of some confusing emotions for them. Not labeling your child, but instead try to help them build that vocabulary to be able to verbalize and label their emotions. And then, like we said, we're all going to make mistakes. So when you make a mistake, just try to make that effort at repair. And then, like we've said already, just don't jump in immediately to try to solve your child's problems. If you can approach them with the thought in mind of trying to be an emotion coach, this will really help, and it lets them know that you're there for them and that they can vocalize their ideas, and that they can be part of that teamwork with you, even if they're younger. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate everybody listening, and I hope that there's something helpful in that for each of you. And please, again, feel free to reach out and just give me a call at Compass if you'd like any other information. Thanks. Blessings.